But what I just wanted to do is just put on my hat here, both in terms of we're getting a local chapter going in Switzerland, but also more broadly, what are the current initiatives going forward in terms of what we're looking forward to doing in next year. And we will be continuing our conferences. So we're having our first one in India, I'll come back to. There's one planned for America, I think it's looking like September. And for the OpenTox Euro conference, I'd like to propose that the Swiss chapter takes that on, and we have it here in Basel in the autumn. That's something maybe we can discuss later, but I think it would be a good timing for that, and make this adverse outcome pathway and how we test against AOPs the theme of the conference. So I think that would be a really interesting conference for us to host here and show how these new methods are being applied. We can start to apply now these in silico in vitro approaches against the AOPs, and we showed in the last couple of conversations how that skin sensitization is showing how this can be achieved and start to get the regulatory acceptance. Internships, this is a program that's just starting that we agreed at our General Assembly last winter. It's taken a little bit of time to start to put some things in place. You'll see in the newsletter the communications that went out today. We're keeping the internship program open until the end of the month, the final deadline. We have reviewed, and our first interns are actually starting in the Asian region from Bangladesh, from Korea, and Taiwan. They are the first interns starting, and we're planning how that program could contribute to the workshop and exchange activity. But it would also be good to see some interns here locally in Europe and America as well. And we want to develop that program further next year. And the local chapters was also an initiative we started. So as we're doing here today to get a local chapter started in Switzerland, and we've agreed that last item would be a focus for us, the need for training and educational activities. We actually don't have so many people who understand how to apply some of the techniques in silico in vitro that we've been talking about in this meeting. And so we want to try to develop training activities, including potentially getting credits for that and certification in the future. But also there's a quite active local chapter has been starting in America in Research Triangle Park. And we're looking at chapters starting in the Asian region, in Korea and in India. And I was just out of the 3Ors Foundation kickoff meeting a few days ago, maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, in New Delhi. And so we want to interact with their program there. And one way we can interact is around our case studies. So locally, we can have a workshop activity like this, but we can share the proceedings virtually. If we have a case study, and we want to have, I'll come back to a reproducibility case study theme for 2019, that material could be used by the local chapters in their workshop, and they can maybe come up with insights that are different around the same data set. They could have their hackathon locally in India on the same case study. And so I think the case studies could form a common theme. So through the website, there's a process now in place for applying for a local chapter, and there's a little bit of budget assigned to the local chapter activity. And it's not meant to be very bureaucratic or complicated, but just grassroots people who have interests like we're discussing today, doing things together. Similarly, there's a simple process we put in place for the internship program. We found we need to enhance it a little bit in terms of mentoring the interns and helping them understand what would be a good small micro project to work on. So we're trying to refine that it's also open there. And I was out briefly for a couple of days in India trying to put in place the starting activities in India. Actually, in the initial OpenTox research project that got this going, we had an Indian partner and a Russian partner. In that case, the reviewers really liked that we included international partners from India. So we're revisiting that. And the first local chapter activity there would be across 3 locations, New Delhi, which is obviously the center of a lot of activity in India, but also Lucknow, which has a very significant toxicology program under Alok Gawan. And I've been out previously to India and run nice workshop activity with him. Indira Ghosh, of course, has been involved with OpenTox as leading the initial partnership. And I also visited Narahari Shastri, who's going to host our first OpenTox workshop and conference. And I think it's going to be in Hyderabad, which is more of a center of life science research. And Bangalore is not too far off a center of informatics research. Will be a nice way to start some, I think, profitable collaboration between us in India. And so we want to have, of course, both active participation. I'm not sure. There's probably notifications. Maybe I need to turn that off. Hold on a second. I'll turn this volume down that we turned on for the questions from the audience, and then we won't hear that. But also international participation. So I've put out a message for people who are interested. I got a lot of replies, so I think we'll have some very nice international participation in the meeting. I also just want to point out OpenRiskNet is running, which is like a next generation infrastructure development for OpenTox, and we have a variety of case studies we're trying to cover with the technology development, and we're very much interested in engaging with associate partners, with users on bringing them into the project. The project's being designed to be extensible and to have a process in place where we can engage with others outside the project, and that's getting to, I think, a very interesting stage in terms of implementation use cases, and we'd like to encourage people to contact us and think about how to get involved. And you'll see there are some activities related to adverse outcome pathways involved as well. And another project that's just started, it's at the end of its first year, and it's also getting into now evaluating proposals from the community in terms of case studies, and it's called NanoCommons. And in a simple manner, I would define it as something like OpenTox and OpenRiskNet for nanotechnology, nanomaterials, nanomedicine. How do we put a framework of open standards and data infrastructure, knowledge infrastructure supporting the kind of science that's going to be going into so many different industries and things we're going to be using in the years to come. And it's also a good time to engage with NanoCommons in terms of where it's going on solving problems for, it's very much case driven, solving problems for it. And there are quite a lot of activities towards providing tools, providing training on tools, enabling users to do modeling, to use in silico tools supporting risk assessment, and trying to be integrative and bring different competencies and tools together to solve practical problems. So a conversation that's been running with myself and Waida Tong at the FDA and others for some time is this issue of reproducibility. And we have a paper coming out, I'm just finishing it, sending it off before Christmas, on this topic of in silico reproducibility. And we're basically proposing that we think this is an important goal to have if the results of in silico methods, like we're discussing often in meetings like OpenTox, can be used for the regulatory purpose. What are the principles and practices we need to achieve this? Can we actually reproduce the results from the scientific literature, even from a few years ago? And if not, what do we have to do to achieve this in silico reproducibility if a company is going to create evidence using the new methods in a safety assessment of an ingredient that's going to a regulator like the FDA? How do you go about doing that? And how can scientists at the regulatory agency evaluate the quality of the evidence? Can they reproduce the results themselves? And if they can't reproduce exactly the same answer, can they understand why not and figure out the puzzle? So we think it's very important in this discussion that it be community-based. And so the ideal will be to use proposals around case studies for predictive model building, for integrated testing, just like the one we discussed with skin sensitization, and in the area of toxicogenomics. Those are 3 case study areas to put proposals for practices and real problems with real data out to the community, who can then discuss and work on them in an open knowledge community framework, as we would like to support. So local chapters, we can get the interns involved. We can have our workshop activities that we have alongside our conferences with this theme, and the community can try to figure out this puzzle of what we need to do. So a theme for 2019, I think, is very worthwhile. And this is the picture I like to use today that I stole from a table in Korea where we were enjoying the great Korean food, which is a little bit different to the picture I imagined when I first started out. You know, the early days of OpenTox, we emphasized using principles from the semantic web to have this semantic interoperability. And we still try to achieve this vision, if we have the ontology, to be able to have this interoperability. But I think sometimes you also have to settle, and we increasingly have tools for settling, to have what we need to describe as a weight of evidence from many different sources on the same table, around which we can have the conversations we need to have a good outcome. And so if we provide access to the data on a knowledge framework, so that it can be evaluated transparently, around which judgments can be made, I think more and more the timing is good for communities like OpenTox to develop the open standards and practices for achieving this. And sometimes we may have to make shortcuts while we don't have the perfect ontology. So with that, that's taking a look at some of the activities we're planning for the coming year, and I hope we'll work on that together with some of the groups in Switzerland who've been discussing the topics today, and of course with a lot of other people internationally. So thank you for the time on that.